Good afternoon, Grant.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to our entire audience to the second episode of Turbocharge Tomorrow, brought to you by Distillery. Grant, we've got a lot of ground to cover today.
Yes, we do.
All right, so the theme for today is all about how to create simplicity in an increasingly complex world. We're going to talk a lot about the progression of AI, generative AI. We're going to talk about the progress that we've made since AWS ushered in a cloud era 17 years ago. Can you believe that? 17
Crazy.
years ago.
Yeah, it's wild.
We're going to talk a lot about how software leaders can lead through this complexity and how they can create the environments and give that direction to enable and empower their teams to move forward with speed and efficacy.
It's a plan.
Awesome. Before we do, I want to make sure for our entire audience that they've got your background. So if you wouldn't mind, do me a favor and introduce yourself for our audience.
So, my name's Grant Ecker. I'm the chairman and founder of the Chief Architect Forum, which is a collaborative nonprofit that brings together Fortune 500 chief architect practice leaders together to collaborate. We have about 265 members globally. We just got back from our first European two-day event in Amsterdam and had our first one in the U.S. Last October. So it's growing, and we're starting to actually add a lot of local events, which is pretty fun. By background, I'm a chief architect, just graduated from Danaher 1st of March as their global chief architect. Prior to that, I was the global chief architect at Walgreens Boots Alliance. And prior to that, I was that same role at Medtronic. I also helped to build the architecture practice at Lowe's Home Improvement. And now I'm actually kind of seeking my next role while stepping into a lot of thought leadership and doing a lot more with the forum in the interim, which has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm honored and privileged with that background, Grant, to have you here today. So, all right, let's dive into it. We're going to start with the art of simplification, kind of talking about cloud migration. So as I mentioned, it was that magical summer. If you remember back in 2007, Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, and then shortly thereafter, we had the launch of AWS and cloud migration. I think we all knew there was something special going on, but I don't think we realized the extent to which, technology in our lives were going to be changed. So let's fast forward to 17 years. What are you seeing today that's so very much different, and with some of the learnings that we're taking and how we're tackling and approaching cloud today than we did in some of those early days?
Well, boy, folks have kind of learned through the school of hard knocks in those last 17 years, right? We saw the same things we see today with AI that were then a cloud, and only shortly thereafter, or maybe even before, same kind of time frame, the big data era, right? It was everyone's doing it. We better do it before we get behind, without really thoughtfully thinking through what was actually needed to pull that strategy through to make the company's objectives come true. So what we think we saw was a lot of people doing very low value add lift and shift migrations into the cloud, which ultimately had the opposite effects that folks had hoped for. Higher costs to operate, still the same legacy to manage, still limited scalability that's manual in most nature and most of the time, and kind of a real pivot into sort of now we have this entire additional environment to manage as well. Also, a lot of folks weren't able to sell off their data centers like they expected. So what became an initial promise of shut all that stuff down, we're going to move into the cloud, became we're going to kind of be half pregnant and run in both environments at the same time. Now, the promise wasn't wrong. It's just more about how we strategically apply the technology to align to the business goals and try to have the right fit for purpose as we make these pivots, which is, I think, our major lessons to learn.
Yeah. So today we're talking a lot about simplification, but what as we both know, you have now cloud environments, you have data environments, you have hybrid environments, you have different applications that you're moving. So in no way have we simplified this process, right? If anything, as you're architecting, you have to make a lot more decisions, and you have more dependencies, and you have more. We'll talk about microservices in a few minutes, but you have to then make those microservices decisions. So how are architects making some of those decisions and not getting bogged down into the weeds?
Yeah, so I think let's start with migration, right? Because let's start with that. It's kind of where we open the call. So to me, there's really 4 approaches to consider in bringing legacy applications into the future. The first is if we're going to keep our data centers via large mainframes and other significant footprints, they're going to keep us there for a longer lifespan. Well, we should seek to use that to our advantage. And if we have a legacy application that's not going to live as long as the data center is, well, and we don't have it as a strategically important application, it's not going to drive any kind of high level value for the organization, then just let it sit. Honestly, it's cheaper to operate there than anywhere else. However, what can we do to reduce the footprint in that data center as applications that have a strategic intent or alignment to our organization, or things we're modernizing out of that data center over time? Where do they go? Well, now we should start to rent out and take advantage of the space in that data center. And there's actually now, with a lot of these AI companies, now they need a lot of power and compute. They're more than able to rent that space from us. So there's a lot of opportunity there as well to kind of execute on that cloud strategy even today. The next option, okay, so maybe we are going to pivot out of a data center entirely. Okay, well, if it's the same kind of, if it's a scenario where basically that application is going to have a limited life, maybe we do a lift and shift for a medium term period of time, understanding it's higher cost to operate, but also that it's not going to last long. So, okay, let's do that as a stopgap. If, however, we think it's going to last a little bit longer, or we have multiple footprints in this environment, that's where you might want to start to look at a colo strategy, where you actually have you rent your Equinox or your cloud peering providers to put your solutions into kind of a cloud adjacent platform, kind of renting a data center that's going to have better access to the rest of your environment. Now, the last of the solutions is actually going to be what was probably the way to actually operate efficiently in the cloud, which is to modernize the application, to go cloud native. And there's multiple ways that we should actually consider that approach as well.
Amazing. How much do you think kind of the variant of those four decisions across different organizations, or how much have you seen different teams make different decisions with the same set of information or options in front of them? Is this like, it's kind of the playbook that we're settling on, or it's still varying widely organization through, by organization?
I mean, there is no standard operating model across IT organizations, and having been privileged to be in a number of them, also there's no stupid decision police. So sadly, what the executives decide to execute is ultimately what gets executed. So I see every variant of the decisions I provided a moment ago in most shops, and the question is just how strategically they make those decisions. There are also people that sell the problem and basically pay an outside organization to operate for them, which can work as well. So it's really about just trying to push the diligence to have a thoughtful conversation around the portfolio and to be realistic about the long-term nature of the applications and the legacy. Because it's been legacy when we look backwards the past 20 years. Why would we expect that we're going to have no legacy looking forward? I think that's just not realistic.
So let's add one more wrinkle to this. You and I were talking about the buy versus build conversation. It's always been there, but even that is getting harder, right? Not only do you have more off-the-shelf SaaS than we've ever had. We've been building it for 20 years and it's getting better and it's getting cheaper. You have the build option, but even within the build, especially with AI-enabled developers, that's what everyone's trying to figure out. Now you not only have a build, but you have a build and you have a wide multitude of different build approaches. You're talking different shops and they're talking to you about cost being reduced or speed improved, and you're debating quality there. So now you have management of your legacy portfolio with those four discussions that you approached. You have a buy and you have multiple build options.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the same basics have been around forever, right? And now just keep in mind, let's stay localized. We're not talking about legacy solutions anymore. We're talking about the solutions that we do have a strategic intent to invest in, that we have a need to modernize, Now we're in the next wave of decisions. And it isn't immediately, well, let's go build something. It's when you start to go, okay, this thing matters. Great. Number one, do we have a existing standard solution we can reuse that will support the business needs to a sufficient level? Do that first. That is by far the cheapest. That is how you have simplicity, is by having less in the environment. So those opportunities, I suggest we try to make those fit. So if we can get an 80% fit, then is it good enough? Now, the next wave after that is to buy solutions that meet commodity needs, right? So if this is important for the long-term role of the business, but it doesn't necessarily really differentiate us, can we buy something that's good enough and just use it without doing too much customization? Okay, if not, then you start to get into buy and configure, right, where commodity needs cannot be met, or we can't simply go off the shelf and buy them, but it's mostly commodity to our business. Okay, we'll do a little bit of buy and configure, and customize where we can't configure, right? So that's the slow elevation. Now, then this last classification, when we actually are talking about either we just can't get this thing because we are in a unique business that nobody else is in, which is closely related to, but not always the same as, this is so differentiating to our business that we really want to invest in creating a strategic differentiating capability here, where technology is a major part of that. It's not just people and process. This is where we actually start to get into build. And I think there's an extremely important focus here around AI, where you can use that to start to augment the solution that you create, both in terms of how it's delivered, but also in terms of how you build, right? Some of the best co-pilots out there are software development co-pilots that help you bring in the right code snippets and the right types of structure to pull your solution together.
Yeah.
So that's really the kind of thoughtful approach I suggest taking as you work through, okay, this has to move and it does matter to our business. What do we do with this thing?
100%. Thank you. That's helpful. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and often, almost on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Let's double click into the AI enabled developers. So as you talk to your members, I believe you mentioned 265. Yeah. I'm curious, how much of this is, exploratory and experimentation at this stage, and how much of this is both within their teams, on the client side, the corporate level, and in the vendors and partners that they're working with. Are we seeing some of the tangible applications and realizations of some of the benefits of both maybe a time reduction and a speed from a utilization of, this latest generation of generative AI tools?
Well, it's even beyond my members. I've actually been at a lot of events recently, and I'll tell you that, I'm speaking with a lot of the peers in industry, in architecture roles and otherwise. We're all talking about this space, and it's very much a bell curve. I've actually had a couple people not raise their hand that they've used ChatGPT in a conveation last week. It's shocking. Really? Like, some people were just shocked.
Yeah.
That's
true. In this space, a technologist, right?
Yes. Wow. So the fact is that you're going to always find laggards. And there are people that are inventing layers on top of layers. I learned a little bit about the Georgia Pacific implementation of causal AI, where they're building not just the knowledge graph, but they're flipping the script and having the AI start to ask questions of their aging workforce so they can get smarter about how they self-optimize decisions at multiple layers of everything from ERPs down to the manufacturing floor. So it's all real. And I guess what I would do is break it apart into three categories. So there's the off-the-shelf commodity AI. Believe it or not, yes, that's a thing. The chat bot you're going to provide to your entire organization that's just honestly a clone of ChatGPT last year that isn't going to leak information to the public internet. Like, very easy to point and shoot deploy a solution that's going to do that. Very low cost. You don't need GPT-4. You don't need 4 or 5 Turbo. You can roll out, a GPT 3.5 solution for 1/13 the cost per token and get plenty of value from a simple chatbot like that. And you can also make it a simple notch higher, which is still very much in the commodity AI space, where you add RAG or, it's basically adding a search on top of it, right? Where retrieval augmented generative search, where we take some of the things from our repositories and build a smarter query first. Considering the things I found that were interesting in this policy document, how should I answer this person's question about this thing? And now we ship it to that same commodity AI engine that helps put it into the words and phrases and uses a little bit of common
Yeah.
knowledge to bring back an answer that's going to be human consumable.
Yeah.
That stuff's all easy. That stuff's very readily available for any organization ready to adopt it. And it's something that I see pretty broadly in place in most organizations.
Yeah.
You also have the stuff you can buy, the co-pilots for Office, which are on their way. They're great vision, great product, but not all the way there yet, as you'll talk to most folks working with it, which I think even Microsoft would happily admit. But then we start to get into some of the other categories, the more core AI technology that's going to be built on your knowledge graphs, and even moving further into when you're developing drug research and cures for cancer and DNA research, where there's a lot more secret sauce in the mix. We can talk a little about those as well.
Yeah. The bell curve comment is interesting, especially even as I see this every day. I mean, you just have to get in there and experiment, and they are, I mean, radical. We are, it feels similar to how it felt with like the iPhone, with, the introduction of cloud. It has that similar type of feeling right now. Certainly intimidating. So I understand that. And it's interesting on the flip the script. I like that a lot. I mean, I think really, the next, 6 to 12 to 18 months for me, I'm just like, it's exciting. It's hard. It is dizzying, even for someone who feels like they're keeping up. The amount of new news and the power and the impact of that new news that's coming out almost on a daily basis is interesting, even in our lifetime, as we've gone through a few of these paradigm shifts, right, Grant?
Oh, absolutely. It's everything kind of going to the next level of scale. And the Gartner published this week, we've reached the height of inflated expectations and the hype curve of AI. And I disagree. They're still making AI toothbrush that are out in the stores. For real, look it up, Oral-B. It's insane. So, I believe we've crushed the ceiling of the height of inflated expectations, and we continue to go. And there's more tech behind it. And, but the curve is the same. It's the same shape. So we're gonna the bigger you are, the harder you fall. But at the same time, I think one of the things we can do as leaders is not get too worried about knowing every detail. To me, the real value is to understand the business case and the business application. I have a brilliant friend who created an AI business looking at distance between words and some other really wonderful linguistics, but it was missing the business application. And that to me is the secret sauce that we as leaders have to be focused on, is how does this technology enable our business? In fact, I'll have to give you the two other categories of the AI space, right? We talked about the commodity side. Then there's the more core side, which is around building the knowledge graphs, starting to create some of the data engineering pipelines and feeding that into AI just to keep it simple. And then, but also, where can we leverage the public AI in that space? Because for us to put in our own AI tool chain might be $30 million. And by the time we're done, think about how far the market will have been after we're done with that year implementation. So unless we're doing something super secret, go rent that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Have the AI pluggable as one of the parts of the architecture. Are we going to use OpenAI today and Gemini tomorrow and Llama 3 the next day, which is now kind of at parity in some of the most recent tests you're reading about? Have that flexibility in your architecture. Only when something is the cure for cancer, the super secret sauce of Coca-Cola, now we need to build our own AI pipelines, because the AI tech is good enough. But I need to protect the sensitivity of the insights of the environment to a different level. The vault is a lot tighter, and I'm willing to sacrifice some of the innovation I might get from the market to have the privacy and the trade secrets of innovation protected. Those are the three kind of quadrants I see. And most of the activities to the far left in the commodity space, there's a significant drop off in the middle, where I think you maybe see 20% playing in that space. And then there's only a very, very small percent of folks that justifiably are in that sort of new to world innovation space. Now, you will find, of course, AI companies over there as well, because that's their product. But in terms of like the big companies that we all know, it's a very small use case to be over in that final use case.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, we got a little bit of time left here on this episode, so I want to turn kind of our final segment. We're going to talk a lot about leadership, Grant. So when you're leading through these massive periods of changes and paradigm shifts, it can be harder than even, what we kind of do at come to, work every day. And you got, to your point, all different ends of the spectrum. You got a lot of fear, folks that are afraid of losing their jobs, or to your point, for the security concerns. And then you have early adopters inside of your team. So how are your members, or how are you thinking about, if you're a technology leader, or quite frankly, any leader at this point, leading and navigating your teams through some of these massive changes over the next couple of years?
Well, I think, especially in the architecture profession and any technology executive, leading change is a really important part of our job. So as we bring in these new ideas and we kind of come through the hard work to rationalize that we're going to build and we're going to do it in this way, now we have a larger change to drive. And it's usually broader than technology. It's people, process, information, and of course tech, as well as KPIs. So understanding and breaking down the strategy to the key capabilities that we need to deliver on. So if we need to grow product and service, if we need to grow market share, we might need a stronger capability in product and service innovation. We might need a stronger capability in marketing. We might need to bring more key opinion leaders along the way with us. So those are some of the capability areas that we need to focus on. Now, within those, is it people, process, info, or tech? And where it's tech, now we tree that down to the what and where and how of that tech, so that we have that answer of why we're doing this work and what the work is, and now how we're going to do it. And then we can bring it to people. And as we bring it to people, some people are going to challenge us. They're going to say, why? Or isn't this a better way? And I think it's really important that we as leaders listen to that resistance and try to make sure we understand it, because a lot of times things sound good at this altitude, but they don't make sense at this altitude. Be ready to adapt, right? Firm beliefs loosely held. Until we hear something better, we're firm in our strategy. But then if somebody gives us something to reconsider, we listen. Also, not being afraid of skin knee. We show people the strategy. We say you're right, and we explain that in the grand scheme of things, this is a trade-off we have to accept. Bring people into that. And honestly, if people have felt heard and they understand that their opinions have been considered, then they usually will jump on ship and join us in the broader journey. And I think that's something that's our role as leaders, is to get everyone rowing in the same direction.
No, I love that. What I heard from you is part education, for that individual or potentially that leader that hasn't experimented with ChatGPT yet, inside their organizations. I mean, and it's such a visual tool. And like, if you get someone that, is pretty proficient in there, even like a, 2-minute demo of a real world application is pretty visually powerful. So part education, part, inspiration as you're working through your teams to inspire them to, we talk a lot about, and sometimes it's cliche, but the art of the possible, to bring those to the teams. And also, like, I heard a brutally honest assessment the other day from a leader about, will AI take my job? And the leader said this to say, he goes, if you're a mediocre writer, if you're a mediocre developer, in all honesty, I think you should be concerned for your job over the next 5 to 10 years. He's like, if you're a fantastic writer, if you're a fantastic developer, he said, you have nothing to fear. And I thought that was one of the most, refreshing and brutally honest kind of takes on the technology, that, again, these are tools, these are powerful tools, but in the right hands, they push you to improve upon your craft. What's your take on that?
I don't think I agree with him, but I can respect the opinion. I believe it's really going to be the leaders to figure out how to do artificial intelligence plus human intelligence to increase their outcomes. So basically, if you're a fantastic writer and you just won't even touch the stuff, you've got some risk. I would be more worried about that person.
Agreed.
The mediocre person who embraces change and learns how AI can take their game from mediocre to fantastic. So maybe a slight difference of opinion, but I believe that the people that figure out how to use AI to augment their output are going to be successful, just like every other part of automation in our entire careers, right? From moving from assembly lines to manufacturing equipment, the printing press, right? It's the people that have figured out how to take these innovations and drive better outcomes that win.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well said. Okay, so I think, Grant, we're going to get you out of here on this. We call it Turbocharge Tomorrow for a reason. As you think about kind of leaving our audience here with one applicable strategy or tactic that they may employ or deploy tomorrow, if they could pull that forward to this afternoon. I know I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit.
Fine.
What's one thing, one tactic, one strategy that you think maybe is underutilized and that's folks should be pulling forward into their repertoire today?
Very much understanding what the business is trying to achieve and how that strategy comes into the key capabilities we need to enable it and how those solutions tree up. So many shortcuts. It's the biggest mistake I make. I can make my project that I want to do sound like the strategy at the very top of the house, but I haven't done the work to figure out what the company needs to be great at to achieve the strategy. So we end up with all these little tactical things that never actually complete the picture of the holistic transformation needed. Do the work. Spend the time to understand the strategic differentiation of the ideas and to make sure that you have coverage across the strategy that you seek to achieve before you start to just go ham on the cool projects and the interesting ideas that so easily captivate us, particularly with all the distractions of today's AI press and world you just talked about.
I love it, Grant. Back to the foundations, back to the basics, 100%. We started this in talking, what's the antidote to complexity is really that simplicity is really some of those foundations. And, good to great. I forget the exact year, but I believe, late 80s, that hedgehog concept. What's the one thing in the world that you could be the best at, and just continuing to refine, and leverage new technologies and new levers to become better at that.
Totally. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
Today.
Thank you so much, Grant. We appreciate it. This has been Turbocharge Tomorrow, and we're going to catch you on the next episode. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your afternoon.